I don't believe that the concept nothing has a material component. Now, don't get me wrong, because I think it's a useful concept. I remember being really surprised when I was young and found out that the number one as a concept was older than the number zero as a concept. And it's amazing to me, even if in some cultures that weren't true, that in our history that we had this concept of one in the West earlier seems strange because everybody knows the number line starts at zero. But the thing is, nothing is an abstraction that does, not have this material component, and therefore, the things that have material components got named first. Even animals understand the concepts of objects that have a material component. All right. Now, the idea of nothing has a material component in the brain, and as such, it has a role in things like induction. If you keep reducing the number of apples, you keep having a number, and eventually you get to one less than one. So you need that concept, and then that allows you to have symmetry around that and have concepts of negative numbers. Um, okay, also somewhat abstract, but they refer to a material component, whereas nothing refers to the absence of a material component. Now, somebody in comments to a recent video was saying, "Don't you have to have nothing so that the light can pass between here and there." And yet, I could just as easily say, if we're going to use, some sort of logical attempt like a priori truths, to say that it needs something to travel through. So just because the something that is there allows light to travel through, like glass does, doesn't mean it's not there. And in reality, space, whatever space is, if it's associated with some sort of a particle, that'd be interesting. But whatever it is, if it's any abstraction of a field that you want to give that has this spatial component, as fields do, um, it's something. So a vacuum is something. What is it? It's empty space. It's not no space. It's not nothing. To have something, to mention a word, these all invoke a material reality. So that a word like nothing that has no material component does actually have this material component in the mind. Okay, so it does have a material component. Okay, so to be careful, you say, you know, some sort of phrase that we should probably coin and accept amongst one another, um, of when something has a material component outside the brain. Okay. Now, I do not think that nothing has such a material component. And we think, oh, it has to. It has to be the contrast to something. No, that's only if you have to think in terms of dichotomies, right? You need something in its opposite, truth and false to do the truth functional Boolean arithmetic. But you don't have to do Boolean arithmetic. You can work with scalars and handle the gradients and gradation and numbers with infinite digits and all kinds of things like this that are really useful to handle. And if you do that, then you just need relative amounts. You need to be able to assign a unit to some example case, and then you need to be able to compare that to the number of units you get in some other case. Okay, and that's doable. And you don't need the opposite of nothing. You just need different, amounts of stuff. And in terms of nature and what is natural, well, yeah, everything is natural. So I guess we can't talk about it. No, everything is natural, but we can talk about it because we can make a criteria for when we're talking about something that's more natural versus less natural. Okay, and it depends on the context. So, for example, all of the behavior that human beings do is natural. It just exists somewhere on this bell curve. Okay, so there's normal natural behavior. All right. If we are talking about homosexuality and is it natural? Well, yeah, because on this bell curve, lots of animals, there's a certain amount of homosexual behavior. It's out at the edges. That's natural. You have to have a bell curve, so of course it's out at the edges. In that sense, it is natural. Is it the normal or statistically typical behavior? No, it is not. Okay, so that's that. On the other hand, if we're talking about making our cities more natural or operate in a more natural way, we're talking about taking stuff from the thick, fat middle of the bell curve that you find in the forests. You know, we're not talking about every strange, beautiful thing that can happen in a little nook and cranny somewhere in nature, but we're talking about which city is more natural? The one that has more trees, like a forest, and like typical natural, like the fat part of the bell curve of nature, or, one that doesn't. We can make that comparison. Now, is it natural for a city to exist with no trees in it? I guess in the sense that it's out there and the exception to have no trees, it did happen, so okay, it's a part of nature, but it happens statistically much less often overall in nature and then the history of nature, right? Because we could build a city all the way around the globe. It wouldn't change the statistics if we count, let's always calculate what the bell curve of nature looks like overall from here until the last species that isn't eradicated between us and our aunts and our cousins, um, which would be about 6 million years ago. Okay. All right. This is my new nature motif.